What I wish my father taught me was that education is really like an equation. There are different parts that you must have, that must be present in order for you to achieve the desired outcome. Another way to look at this is to consider education like a meal. To make a really nice meal, you need some specific ingredients. Those ingredients need to be included in the right proportion at the right time to ensure that the final taste of the meal is as it should be. So in today's lecture series and today's session, I'm going to be talking about education, and I'm going to be trying to paint a picture for you. I hope this will come across in the right way, but I'm going to be trying to paint a picture so that you can see education from a different light. I don't know how you were raised. Perhaps if you were raised like I was raised to believe that as long as you were educated, as long as you were a graduate, that you had a chance. You had a chance that there was a good chance that you were going to do well in life. I don't know how old you are. I don't know how young you are. Irrespective of what age you are, I would recommend that you listen very closely, because what I'm about to share in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes could be life-changing. I'll start off by saying that traditionally we have always believed that the education process had to be founded and had to be built on having what we call academic education. I don't have a problem with that. It was also founded on the idea that as soon as you finished your academic education and you went into your professional education, that was all you needed. Those were two ingredients, two parts of the equation. I want to say that I think that is very flawed. I think that's slightly misleading, but more than anything, it's very obsolete. Now, I want you to think about this. I have here a bottle of water. We call this H2O, two parts of hydrogen, one part of oxygen. If I mix it in that right proportion, I create a compound. This compound is called water. If I drink it, it provides me with nourishment. It's odorless, it's colorless, and it's good for me. Now, if I choose to alter the components of this compound, if I change the equation, for example, by deciding to mix one part of hydrogen with one part of oxygen, I have altered the equation, and therefore I have altered the outcome. I have now created a new compound called HO. We call the new compound hydrogen peroxide. It's very similar in its visual to water. It's odorless and it's colorless. It has no color. But if I drink it, it'll kill me. Two different compounds, two outcomes, simply because I changed one part of the equation. Now, in the same way, the education equation is incomplete. We've always held on to the academic and the professional. For many people, they focus on just the academic, and then some people are lucky enough to transcend and move beyond just having the basic skills of how to read and write, and they move on to professional. Very few develop professional education and their professional skills. I'm going to talk about each of these briefly, and I want to take you down a pathway of introducing you to two additional parts of the equation that will make the education process complete. Now, as a matter of fact, if you analyze your life, if you look at your life right now, I can say with some level of conviction, with some level of commitment, some level of assurance, that I could predict the outcomes of the key areas of your life by simply making an observation. I can look how you spend your time, I can look how you use your money, and I can predict the outcomes of your life in each area: health, happiness, financial wealth, your relationships, your spiritual health or spiritual well being. And I can do that simply because by looking at how you use your time, how you use your resources, how you use your energy, I would know whether you've been trained in all areas of the education process. Now, let me start with myself, as I always like to do. I was raised to believe that as long as you had academic education, as long as you could read and you can write, and as long as you were willing to put in the work and study more and learn more and move that beyond just the academic point and say, okay, let's move into having some level of professional development, professional education, I should say, that you would be successful. I have found from my experience that that is not the case. And I think there are a few billion people in the world today who are living examples and who from their the results that they've created in life validates what I'm about to share with you. If you can read and write, if you can listen to what I'm saying, and if you understand what I'm saying, I think you have the foundation. You've got the foundation. You don't need to keep working on the foundation. It's time to move on. Now, the foundation needs to be continually looked after. You want to make sure that, for example, you're continuously reading, you're improving your reading skills, you're improving your listening skills, you're improving your writing skills. But it's not what you need to be successful. In any of the areas that I've mentioned: health, happiness, prosperity, well-being, success in relation to financial success or financial wealth, relationships, your ability to read and write is a foundation stone. You have to build on the foundation. I was raised and I was taught to read and write. I moved from there and I decided that I was going to become an engineer. So I studied engineering. I graduated from engineering with a bachelor's in engineering. But I decided that I wanted to take it a little bit further. Why? Because I was conditioned to think that, well, if you really want to do well in the professional game, you needed to have an outstanding academic qualification. Now, remember, I'm still talking about academic education now. So I made a decision that I would move forward and I would enhance my bachelor's degree in engineering and I'll go for a master's in engineering. Why not? At least that way I could distinguish myself from other people. If everyone was going to have a bachelor's degree and we were all going to be as good as each other, and I wanted something that would give me the edge, that unique competitive advantage. So I decided to do a master's in engineering. I graduated. I realized actually it was a good decision. Now I'm going to explain a principle very shortly, and you're going to understand this principle, and it might help you if you're wondering, should I do a master's? Should I go and do a bachelor's? Should I study further? I'll explain a principle in a way in which you can answer that question very easily. So I finished my bachelor's in engineering. I had a master's in engineering. I decided I was going to go into work. But I decided, you know what? At some point, 10, 15, 20 years from now, who knows, I might really need to have the skills and the abilities, the competence to be able to manage a firm by myself. I wanted to have my own company, be my own boss, have people work for me. So I made a decision. I started working. Then I decided, well, you need to understand how businesses function, because in truth, the language of business is accounting. And that's the reason why most people would do an MBA, because you want to have an understanding about various parts of how businesses function. You don't want to focus on just the technical part, which is what I focused on, just the technical delivery part. I wanted to understand how a business is put together. How do I manage a business? And I needed to know not just the accounting, I needed to know all the other parts of what makes a business thrive. So I decided to do another master's in management. I finished. Great. It was time now to move into work and further my career. At that point, I had finished my education under the academic umbrella. Tick, done. I moved into work and I started to specialize. I then made a decision, well, having gone into engineering, if I wanted to be the best, then I had to study the people who were the best, and I had to find a company that was willing to train me. Now we move into the second part of the umbrella of learning, which is your professional education. If you want to become a doctor, you're trained on how to become a doctor. You start that process in the university or in the schools primarily, and then you move into actually being an apprentice, working for a hospital, working under some more experienced doctors. If you want to learn how to fly a plane, you have to shadow someone, you have to do some practice, you have to go through simulations. That is professional. So you start your professional at the point where you're finishing, maybe you're graduating, or just before you begin, because they're teaching you some of the basic fundamentals, especially if you're going to be somewhat of a specialist like engineering and be a doctor, or probably be a scientist, and probably be a lawyer. You need to learn first principles. When you've completed that first part of that first principle learning process, then they trust you. You're put into a working environment where a company then takes all your theoretical knowledge and they try to show you how to put it into practical application. And that is where you're learning on the job. Now, the more you develop yourself professionally, the more you advance professionally. That's very important. So the first two, what I'll call pillars to education, academic and professional, are essential, depending on your dreams and depending on your goals. Majority of people believe that's all they need to succeed. Many of them, should I say most of them, are wrong. I'm going to talk about two additional pillars that are needed. This success equation needs academic, you need professional. The next one you need is financial. Financial education. It's a completely separate pillar. You cannot tag it onto the pillar of academic or professional. And here's the reason why. When you're going through your very early stages of learning through kindergarten, you're being taught how to read and how to write. But you're being taught by an education system that has been designed in many cases and has been influenced in many cases by the government and other social institutions. So you're not taught about money. Now I want you to listen very carefully, because if you understand this concept, I think your life could radically change. I hope for the better. Or one thing I can say is your life is not going to be the same. It's going to become better. It's going to become worse, or it could become worse, but it's never going to be the same. That's for sure. If you can grasp what I'm about to share. Financial education is the education where you're taught about the art and the science of wealth, investing, and money. Now, I don't know where your beliefs have come from. I would say this very happily and very clearly. I don't really care. What I do want to pass along is this. Irrespective of your beliefs, you have to recognize and accept that there is a science to creating wealth, and there is an art to invest in, and therefore money needs to be studied. I'm going to spend some time under this pillar before I move to the fourth, but this is critical. During your academic and during your professional education, you're not taught about money. You're taught about so many other things. I'm going to say this, and I feel sad that I'm saying this, with the exception of a very few professions. About 80 to 90% of what you're taught in school, based on theory, is obsolete by the time you're ready to go into the professional game. It's obsolete. See, knowledge is changing at a very fast pace. It's a very fast rate. As a matter of fact, in less than 14 months, every 14 months, the knowledge we have doubles. Information is doubling at a very fast rate, depending on the line of profession you choose. So for example, if you're going into something like technology, information is changing sometimes on a fortnightly basis. So you have to keep up with the information really quickly. If you're in an area such as engineering is a little bit slow. The medical sciences are a little bit faster, especially the areas of research, because they're developing some new inventions and new ways of saving lives and making us live longer. Within the area of law and accounting, just a little bit slow. So you have to understand, okay, how fast is this train that I'm on? Because each of those professions is like a train. You get on the train and it travels, and it's been traveling for a while. So if you go back 10, 15 years ago, what you'll find is that the accounting system that, let me use an example, has been used in Great Britain, fundamentally has not changed. Fundamentally, I did not say it hasn't improved, but fundamentally it has not changed. There have been iterations and improvements along the journey in the 10, 15-year period. Now, if you go into medical sciences, it's a different story, and so should it be. More importantly, if you come into technology, it's a completely different story. As a matter of fact, as of today, technology in 12 months from today will have radically changed. It's becoming obsolete so quickly. Now, so here is the point. Most of what we learn to enable us to survive and thrive professionally, by the time we finish learning and our education process, is obsolete. So you have to relearn. Someone once said that in times of change, I think it was Alvin Toffler who said that in times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, whilst the learned will be beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Now, I want you to listen to that quote very carefully. In times of change, I'm talking about change now, and the rapidity of change determines how quickly you have to learn. In times of change, the learners will inherit the earth. And the learned, those who studied before but never grew, never learned, will be beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. I want you to ask yourself a simple question. Am I a learner, or am I already learned? Am I stuck in this old group of people who will never change? Or am I amongst those who are learning every day? Now, I believe genuinely that learning should be sacred. I see it as a duty. I see it as an obligation that you and I have. You know, I wake up every day excited for one reason. What am I going to learn today? What am I going to learn? I'm always trying to learn something new, because if I hold on to the knowledge that I have, I'm obsolete in a short while. Now let's move forward. Back to financial education. Let me use an example that I think will maybe wake you up. And that's what I'm intending to do, is to wake you up. Because it took a long while for me to wake up. It took a long while. The average person will work, on average, for about 40 years, between 40 and 50 years, depending on when you start. If you start working at 25, you might retire at 65. We're living much longer now, and as a result of that, most people are working much longer. So the average person is working 50 years now. I predict that in 5-10 years, the average person will be working for maybe 60 years or more, because we're living much longer, thanks to science. Although the average person works for 50 years, we'll give our time. So every day, the average person will work for 8 hours every day. Every single day, and let's assume the average person would do that for, who knows, maybe 300 days in a year. 8 hours, 300 days in a year, for 50 years. Now, when the average person retires, the average person is not financially free. Now, for me, that doesn't make sense. I'm thinking something is wrong. I work for 8 hours every day at work. But let me be a little bit more realistic. If I include the time that I invest, or spend, that's the right word, that I spend getting ready, preparing, and then journeying to work, and then journeying back from work, the average person spends about 12 hours dedicating their time and energy towards work. So if it takes you an hour to go to work and an hour to come back, that's 2 hours. You add 2 hours to 8 hours of work, that's 10 hours. Most people wake up in the morning, get ready. Some people, it takes them an hour. Then you have the extra 1 hour for the things that we do in either preparation or dealing with the vicissitudes of actually being a professional. So it comes down to roughly between 10 hours and 12 hours. Depending on where you live and how far your work is from home, you might spend 1 hour going to work. You might spend less. Some spend even more than that. So you're looking at roughly 12 hours. Now, we have 24 hours every day. We spend, on average, 8 hours asleep. So if you discount the 8 hours you need to sleep, you're left with 16 hours. And out of the 16 hours, you're spending about 12 hours dedicated towards work. Now, I don't need a calculator to know that that's approximately between 75% and 78%, probably 80% of my waking day, my waking time for work. And I would do that every single year for 50 years. But at the end of the 50-year period, now here is something that's profound that Earl Nightingale said. He said, pick 100 people who've worked their entire life. At the end of their entire working life, one of them is financially secure. Well, he says one is rich. Probably two are financially secure, meaning they're financially free. He said roughly about 65% of that left are still financially dependent. The rest are probably dead. Now, the equation doesn't make sense. 1 out of 100 is rich. 2 out of 100, if you add the 1, you have 3 people, are financially free. So why do we have 3 in 100? That's 3% of people are financially free. There's a reason. The reason is because very few people have been taught about money. We have beliefs that condition us into how we perceive money. We slave. Some people think that slavery has been banned. You need to wake up, because every single day, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a financial plan, if you don't have a vision of being financially free, getting off what we call the hamster wheel, every day you're a slave to money. Why? Because you see, your lifestyle, whatever that lifestyle might be, has imprisoned you. Most people have a job, and most people work to satisfy and to maintain a lifestyle. I've done this so many times. I meet people, I ask, are you happy with what you're doing? If you had to do anything in the world, what would you do? Would you do what you're doing now? And 7 or 8 out of 10 people say, I wouldn't do what I'm doing now. And I ask the follow-up question, why? I have to pay the bills. And so we're trapped by our lifestyles and our choices. And that lifestyle has to be fed. It's like a child you have. Some people say, well, I don't have kids, I'm single. Well, we all have in some way what I like to call a child. And I call that child our lifestyle. We've conditioned ourselves to live in a certain way. So for that reason, we wake up, we go to work, we work hard, we get paid, and a majority of what we earn, this is so sad, we spend. We spend because we have a lifestyle we have to maintain. The average person cannot save more than 10% of what they earn. So at the end of 50 years, you've worked your entire life. And at the end of the 50 years, you're not financially free. As a matter of fact, you're holding on to a pension, or what you have, you've saved, is almost worth nothing. Reason being that all the money you've been stacking up, because you didn't understand money, the rules of money, the principles of wealth, you didn't understand economics, you didn't understand monetary system, the money you've been stacking up and saving, by the time you're ready to use it, is depleted in value because of something called inflation. So the purchasing power of what you actually have is so low. It's a fraction of what it was, simply because it's a natural process of living in a developed country, society, where you use credit and you use debit. Wherever you have credits being used, you're always going to have issues in relation to interest rates. And as a result of that, consumer spend, and as a result of that, inflation. It's a fact of life. So, but none of us was trained about money. So for that reason, We don't know how to acquire money. That's number one. Because if you understood how to acquire money, most people would choose a different profession. I'm going to explain a few things shortly. I may not have time to go into the detail, but I'm just going to explain a few things. Do you realize that all income is not created equal? All income is not created equal. The profession you choose determines the type of income you will have. If you choose to be a doctor, you will earn what we call ordinary income as a start. If you choose to become a doctor and a consultant and you're going to work for a hospital or work for a practice as an employee, you're going to earn ordinary income, and therefore the type of income you earn, ordinary income, is the worst type of income. If on the other hand, you were trained with a mindset, which is when I started my education, I had that idea. Well, I don't want to work for anyone. I want to have an entrepreneurial mindset. I don't want to be just an engineer. So I went back to learn about how to run a business. If you have that mindset, and if you come out from the education system with the mindset that I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to create jobs, the income you earn is different to the income you would have earned if you were an employee. You've got to understand how money works. You have ordinary income, basic income. We call it active income. But you also have what we call leveraged income. Income you earn as a result of using the resources and the talents and the skills and the experiences and the time of other people. Now, why is this even important? Well, it's important because you have to understand taxation. And depending on the country you live in, I'm going to use the UK as a reference. I'm going to use London as a city as a reference. Depending on the type of income you earn and the tax codes, at the end of the working month or the working year, what you're left with depends on the tax structure and the tax bracket you fall under. And this is critical. Most people work 8 hours. I'm going to use a sweet analogy. You're going to love this. Most people work 8 hours every day. 300 days in the year. Let's assume that maybe you take annual leave and you take holidays and perhaps you call in sick. But let's just say you work just 300 days in a year. I call that 12 months. You work for 12 months. The average person works from January all the way up until about June. Depending on your age, depending on how long you've been working for, you work between January all the way to about May, June. Usually there's a minimum. And everything you earn, the government takes it first. From June down to December, what you earn, you keep. Now, from what you've earned for the rest of the year, less than 10% falls to your bottom line. Why? Because someone else is waiting to take the money for the rent or for the mortgage, the money for the cars and the payments, the money for electricity, the money for providing you with services, the money for transportation, everything. So by the time you're done at the end of the year, if you were to look at it on a month-by-month basis, you only have roughly, now this is mind-blowing, but sad. You know, I could cry just thinking about it. At the end of the whole year, you have less than 21 days worth of income to your name. Now you might be thinking, this is just bullshit. How did he get all those numbers? Let me make it a little bit more clearer. Let's assume that all you do is pay 30% in taxes. Now, my first question to you would be, do you know what your tax bracket is? Do you know how much of your gross income? So you look at your contract of work and they say, well, you're going to be paid £70,000 annually. Let's use that as an example. That's gross. That's before taxes. That's before the deductions. Do you know how much you pay in taxes? But let's just say it's 30%. I use the analogy of between January and June, May, June, to represent the fact that that 30% out of 12 months is simply about 4 months. January, February, March, April. So you're looking at May, June. Now, depending on how long you've worked for, if you've worked longer, if you earn more, you might pay 40% in taxes. Basic taxes. We're not even talking about other taxes that you pay for. When you put in value-added taxes, income tax, and all the other taxations, and here in the UK, we do what we call national insurance. Depending on where you're watching from, it could be social insurance. But by the time you add everything, you're paying roughly, even if you're a basic payer, you're paying about 40% to 45% in taxes. If you earn more, you're paying about 50 to 60% of everything. Now, every time you walk into the supermarket and you pay for something, you pay taxes. We call it value-added taxes, 20%. Every time you buy something online, you pay taxes. When you sum up everything you're spending on just your discretionary spending, your shopping, you look at how much am I paying in taxes. Combine that with what you're paying in taxes for your income and all the other national insurance or social security insurance, whatever that might be, you're paying about 50%. So if you look at it technically, if you work for 12 months, it means 50% of 12 months is 6 months. So it means between January and June, someone else is taking the money. And then once you're done, what's left, you then have to commit to the lifestyle that you become a slave to. I'm sorry that this might sound a little bit harsh, probably too strong. I'm trying my best not to come across as being negative. My whole intention is to say, listen, if my father had taught me this, I would have chosen a different pathway, completely different pathway. Now, here is the interesting thing. Depending on the profession you choose, and depending on your tax bracket, and depending on the type of income you have, your pathway towards wealth is different. If you earn more leveraged income, meaning income generated from the services of others, what you pay in taxes is different. So we have here in the UK, we have what we call the ordinary taxes, main taxes, basic taxes. And if you earn as a normal employee, we say, okay, you pay taxes on your income, basic. If you have what we call portfolio income, meaning you have an asset that you sell, or an asset that increases in value, that is sold, you pay taxes, but it's less than what you pay for your job. In addition, if you have royalties, if you have perhaps income from other assets, for example, real estate, properties you own or assets you own that pay you income, we call it passive income. The taxes you pay are slightly different. It's less. Now, if you come into the working profession,